Well, we're watching the Satori Wellness series. Satori has many meanings. The meaning we're using it for is an epiphany. You know, you have a certain epiphany, and you get that aha moment, and then which that aha moment connects to other things in your life that you've been actively doing. So we named this Satori for that aha moment. Especially during this day and age where everybody's working for that personal success, that personal growth, be better, do better. And there's a lot of hard work that goes into it, a lot of, personal work that goes into it. And sometimes you want to give up. Sometimes you want to say, hey, this is not working. I'm going to go back to my old habits until you have that moment of that epiphany where all that work you've been putting in, the links in the chain start to connect and you're like, okay, it is working. So that's the purpose of Satori. And during COVID, we have a lot of people that are home alone or people that are dealing with the COVID through family members and friends, and they can be going through certain type of emotions and uncertainties in their life. So I'm like, hey, let me call some friends that I love, that I admire, that I look up to, and get their thoughts about anything and everything that connects to mental health and wellness in their life. And in your case, you're a director, and you're up and coming director actually, whose work is out there, and you're an actor as well. And more than that, you're my brother. Like you're my brother. So I wanted to invite you on first to just say hello, and maybe you can share how you've been coping, how you've been managing, what things have you been doing to stay resilient, what things help you, what things don't work for you. And that's what Satori is.
Word. I think it's beautiful, man. I think that it's an important process right now, man, because people are being forced into that like self-inventory, where they're being forced into self-actualization, where you got to spend a lot of time alone with yourself, and that's a scary thing for a lot of people, man. It's actually been pretty good for me because I think we do this on a regular basis. It's something we've been doing maybe even since like when we pledged. It's a big part of what we do. I really been creating, man. Thankfully, like I've been writing a lot. So I was in a point in my process, in the creation process, where I had to like sit down and write. And I struggle to actually sit in one place and write. It's tough for me to sit down at the computer or whatever and write. So I gotta like meditate and have things near me, because I'm easily like, I can come up with a lot of reasons not to do it, and get distracted. Oh, let me clean this. Oh, I need to do this, and so I get distracted.
So you mentioned that you have a hard time sitting down and write. Do you mean recently, or is that something you've always struggled with as an artist?
It's always been writing has always been my one of my weak points, like getting it from my head onto the paper, like actually sitting down and sitting at the laptop and writing it out. I find that I'm actually more of a pencil and paper dude. So it's easier for me to sit down and write it out like that by hand, but that I almost end up doing twice the work, because I write it out by hand and then I gotta type it out onto the thing, and then it changes. So one of the benefits of doing that is that the story evolves. So I write it by hand, and then by the time I go to sit down, when I'm transferring it, I start adding other layers that I was missing from when I first wrote it.
Yeah.
During quarantine, what I've realized is that it's like a muscle. So everything we do, it's about how we train ourselves, you know what I mean, and the time we put into it. So now I'm actually a lot better at sitting down to write. I'm getting excited about like, oh, I bet it's time to write. It's a writing session. I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna write. And I realized that came from like, I had to continually do it even when I didn't want to do it. And I didn't do it I'm not very orthodox in the way I do it. Sometimes I'll be writing with Gabe, and while we're discussing things, I'm doing pull-ups, or I'll be doing dips.
Who's Gabe?
Gabe is my creative partner, Gabriel Furman. So me and him, we created Brothers Keeper, and we created Wonder, and we're creating Wonder the series, and Brothers Keeper the movie. So Me and him, we do a lot of collabo writing.
Okay.
There's a program called Final Draft. And Final Draft 11 has a collaboration process where both of you could be writing at the same time online, you know, in real time.
Yeah, yeah, I get it.
So we do that a lot, but now I'm getting better. You know what I mean? Some days I'm still a little fidgety, but what the difference is, I don't judge myself for being fidgety. You know what I mean?
Mm.
I don't judge myself if I can't sit there for longer than an hour and write. Where before I was like, oh man, you're failing. You know, I'm failing. I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do, and then I attack myself.
So it sounds like before you were compounding the stress of writing by judging yourself, and now you just accepted your style. You call it unorthodox, but it's your style, and that style is effective to what you need and, you know, what you want to produce.
Yeah, yeah, and it gives me freedom, like that. Accepting my own style lets me go into it with a different mindset, which now makes me excited about doing it. You know, and it's also affected, and it affects the story because the more avenues I find in not judging myself, or the more things that I get better at. So there's a lot of things in my life that I'm getting to a point that when I do it, the critic isn't as loud as it used to be. So I'm
What
not.
is that critic? What do you mean by critic?
Well, the critic, the voice in my head that's like, oh, you're not good enough. Oh, you're doing that wrong. Oh, nobody's gonna want to see this movie. Oh, that's a stupid idea. You know what I mean? Now I'm like, yo, chill, regular, bro. It's not your time to talk, and I'm not believing the hype anyway. So I'm gonna write this, and if nobody like it, so what? I'm writing it for me.
So it sounds like, I'm sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
No. I was gonna say, so I have a better relationship with the critic these days.
So it
And that
sounds like,
allows me to live into my imagination a little freer.
yeah, I was about to allude to something like that. It sounds like you have mental discipline and mental dexterity now, where before the critic could have been burdensome and didn't allow you much movement to create, but now you change that relationship up, and it allows you more freedom and more creativity.
Yeah. Before I would struggle to write one page because I would write a sentence and I'd be like, oh, that's not grammatically correct. I'd erase it. You know what I mean? And I want to say this, but I don't know how to say it. Oh, that sentence looks too long, and I don't even know grammar. But I would be judging myself on things that intrinsically stop me from writing.
Yeah,
So trying to be right wouldn't let me write. You know what I mean? It's crazy.
like I wanna reel it back a little bit, because in your opening comment, you said something about your personal inventory. Could you explain to me a little more about what you mean by your personal inventory or your inventory?
Well, for that, like, for instance, in that, somewhere along the line, I was like, oh, every time I can't sit down and write, I can't focus. You know what I mean? I hate that, like, and I had all these things in my head that alluded to me not being able to write. And so as I was doing this self-inventory, like checking in on myself and checking my beliefs and checking where I am right now and what still serves me, right, in the way that I think. And so, like, I had to make an adjustment on the way I felt about writing, or the things that I was telling myself. And I was like, it's not that I can't write, you know, it's that I'm struggling right now. But because I haven't taken the time to analyze what works best for me, I was trying to do somebody else's process. And that's never been the kind of dude that I am. So I had to, like, really sit down and look and say, well, where'd that belief come from? Oh, I think that because I'm trying to write the way someone else writes. And that doesn't work for me.
Yeah, so correct me if I'm wrong. So when I think of inventory, I think of like a shop owner going into the back room and having a clipboard, a pen, and a paper, and checking off what's on the shelves, what's selling, what's not selling. So when he makes the next order, he'll know what to order. If he doesn't do that inventory in the back room, it can start to clutter up with stuff that's just not selling, or all types of problems can manifest if you don't do a personal inventory. Is that analogous to what?
Yeah. That's exactly it. Like, I'll look at myself and I'll be like, and it comes from anything. Like, whether I tell myself, like, yo, some days I'm like, yo, I'm not handsome, right? And that's not something that men easily admit, or at least for me, it wasn't something that I would admit. You know what I mean? But I had to come to terms. I started doing self inventory. I'm like, is that true? Or if I look in the mirror, for a while, I used to look in the mirror and I used to see myself overweight. So I couldn't see the progress I was making because I was still stuck in some old idea that I had in my head. So I actively go through the I'll look at myself, I'll sit with myself and be like, all right, where am I right now? Like, am I judgy? If I'm judging, why am I judging? You know what I mean? And how does that serve me? And if not, then it's like, this can't be a part of, not that it can't be a part of my life, but I need to make an adjustment because it isn't serving me where I am today.
Is that personal inventory strictly rational, cognitive, or is there emotional component to it as well?
Oh, a lot of it is emotional intelligence too. You know what I mean? Like when I'm upset, I'm like, yo, why am I really upset? Like what's really going on with me? Why does that trigger me? Especially when that person didn't really do anything, you know, but they'll say something that triggers my pain body. It'll trigger something old, you know, and then I got to go back and look at that and be like, yo, why is that there? How does that like help me?
So you said something that's just sparked my imagination. You alluded to that your thoughts or your dialogue or your inventory has a visceral component, like it's in your body as well. So you called it a pain body, and it sounded as if your body was an alarm system or something, and when you said something negative to yourself, you had a physical response to it. Did I hear that correct?
Yeah. I mean, because I think like ultimately my body is what tells me what does and doesn't work for me, you know. And when things hit me, if you say something and I have a reaction to it, whether emotional or whatever it might be, there's something in me that was like either injured or triggered, you know what I mean? And then I go back and look at him like, yo, why does that have that power over me? Like, what exactly was happening in that moment, you know? Why am I why do I have an urge to get violent when that happens? Where'd that come from? You know what I mean? Right, you know what I mean? Or why does that make me emotional?
So it sounds like this inventory, you have to really sit down and have that conversation with yourself and do that due diligence, and connecting it to your writing. When you do that inventory, you can't be, or maybe you can, you help me out. That judgmental factor really has to be put to the side if you're really doing a good inventory, because you really want to get to the root of, you know, how you're feeling and why you're feeling, or how you're talking to yourself, or why you're talking to yourself in such and such a way.
Yes, and it's being, you got to be like super honest, which is the hard part. You know what I mean? Sometimes, or I know, I only speak for myself, but I realized that there were times when I was like lying to myself to try to get the result that I wanted. You know what I mean? And versus like being honest without condemning myself for the things that I don't agree with. Is that peace, love? You understand? So like if I come and I feel like I'm overweight or I'm not like in the physical condition that I want to be, I don't have to beat myself up for that. I don't have to like make myself wrong because I ate the cake, you know? Now I just sit back and I'm like, all right, man, I love cake. I'm all right with that. That means I got to do fucking 50 more sit-ups or crunches and then deal with what comes from that. But without beating myself up for either failing or relapsing or going or doing something that is counter to what I think I'm supposed to do. If that makes sense.
It does, and I want to ask another question. So when you're doing this, you're going within yourself, you're doing that personal inventory, you're finding out what works for you, what doesn't work for you, why do you feel this way. From what it sounds like, the relationship you're developing with yourself is not random. You started finding causality because you said, I talk to myself like that because I'm fat, and then you led back to because I ate cake. So it was once you do that work, it sounds like you can make that shift of perspective once you find the reason. In your case, you know, I'm going to stop eating cake, or I'm going to eat cake twice a week, or whatever you do to resolve that inner conflict.
Satori.